Welcome to the show today. I have a fascinating story to share with you. It is all about how we can explore the world. Thank you for joining me.
Usually when we talk about visiting an ancient monument, there's this built-in expectation of static history.
Right, yeah. Like it's just frozen in time.
Exactly. You go to a museum or, you walk through some ruins and you look at a statue that's just been sitting there unmoving for centuries.
Right, the past is kept neatly in its box.
Yeah, it's cold stone, it's a relic, and you are just this observer safely separated by this massive, unbridgeable gulf of time.
It's an artifact. You look at it, maybe read the plaque, and you just move on with your day.
Right, but what happens when that expectation is just completely shattered? What if you're sitting there looking at that cold, silent stone, and suddenly, the boundaries of time just dissolve?
Oh, man.
The stone isn't stone anymore. The past isn't the past. You are suddenly face to face with a living, breathing miracle. And that is the threshold we are crossing today.
It's quite a trip.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to take you on a journey into a profoundly mystical piece of source material. We're looking at the evocative poetry of Weerathunga W. Namala.
Specifically, we're diving into a poem that explores these deeply personal nocturnal experiences at some of Sri Lanka's most sacred ancient sites.
And it is a remarkable piece of writing. The poet essentially hands us a map, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's not, a map of physical geography, though the locations are very real. It's more of a map of a spiritual and mystical awakening.
A completely internal map.
Right, an awakening that takes place in the dead of night, where history basically refuses to stay in the past.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how the reality of this poem bends, we really have to start where the poet starts, by setting the physical scene.
Right, you have to ground it first.
Exactly. The narrator doesn't begin with miracles, they begin with extreme isolation.
Yes, the poem opens by grounding us in a highly specific, tangible, and honestly a pretty overwhelming environment before anything supernatural even happens.
Yeah, the narrator describes walking completely alone in the middle of the night.
And the locations mentioned in the text are incredibly significant. The narrator is at the Jetavana Monastery, which is referred to in the text as Devram Vihara, and they're sitting near the Samadhi statue.
Which depicts the Buddha in deep-seated meditation, right?
Exactly. And then later the scene shifts near Kalawewa, standing before the Avukana Buddha.
And just to give you listening a sense of scale, the Avukana Buddha isn't some small carving you can just put on a shelf.
No, not at all.
It is a towering, magnificent standing statue carved out of a sheer rock face. It's over 40 feet tall.
It's massive.
So imagine standing at the feet of a 40-foot stone monolith, completely alone in the pitch black.
And that pitch blackness is key. The poet uses this great word, Ganandura.
Ganandura.
Yeah, and it doesn't just mean dark. It implies this thick, almost suffocating pitch blackness that completely surrounds you.
Wow, so it has a physical presence.
Exactly. It's the kind of darkness that has physical weight. The only illumination is the moonlight crashing down, piercing through the Turuvajala, which is the dense, heavy canopy of the ancient trees.
It's almost like, imagine stepping into a massive, ancient, empty cathedral in the dead of night.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
But instead of being inside a building with walls and doors, you are out in the raw, unpredictable elements of the jungle. It's just you, these massive stone monoliths, the thick darkness, and these sharp shafts of silver moonlight.
Yeah, it would be intense.
The sheer weight of history and that absolute total silence would make you feel like you've stepped completely out of the normal flow of time.
That's a great way to visualize it. What's fascinating here is the narrator's psychological and emotional state amidst this really heavy, solitary atmosphere.
Right, because you'd think they'd be scared.
Exactly. You might expect a normal person to feel incredibly small, or perhaps even terrified by the isolation, the jungle and the darkness. But the text explicitly tells us they're sitting there with deep joy.
Deep joy.
The word used is dutin. They are perfectly happy.
Which implies a level of psychological preparation, right? I mean, they aren't some tourists who got lost in the woods. They went there with a purpose.
Exactly. The poet uses these incredibly grounded physical elements, like the heavy stone, the thick darkness, the solitary moonlight, to anchor you.
To set the stage.
Right. It establishes a mood of deep, solitary reverence. The narrator is completely at peace with the silence, because that sensory deprivation is exactly what prepares the mind.
Oh, interesting. So it's intentional.
Yeah, architecturally and poetically, that total grounding, that stripping away of the noisy modern world, is the necessary launch pad for the massive shift that is about to happen.
Because this quiet, solitary meditation does not last long at all, and the poem doesn't just ease us into the next phase, it gives us a very specific temporal marker.
Yes, it really does.
It says just after midnight. Once that midnight hour passes, the physical, quiet world we just built up completely yields. The silence is just shattered.
It is the hinge upon which the entire poem swings. The exact phrasing is, just after midnight I remember, and then in a fraction of a second, the heavy, dark solitude is entirely gone.
It is replaced by an absolute sensory explosion. The text says that from the sky, from the very womb of the sky itself, comes the sound of sadhu.
Sadhu, yeah.
Now, you'd normally hear sadhu, that deep, resonant chant of blessing and devotion in such a crowded, bustling temple.
Right, with lots of people around.
But here, it's echoing down from the empty night sky. So you go from total suffocating silence to this profound, booming chant raining down from the clouds.
It's a massive auditory shift.
Right.
But the visual shift is arguably even more dramatic.
Oh, the visuals are staggering. The narrator looks up, and instead of just a dark tree canopy, there is a literal canopy formed by scattered, glowing flowers.
Such a beautiful image.
The text specifies they are Parasathu Madara flowers, and these aren't earthly flowers you go pick in a garden, right?
No, they are purely celestial. So you have heavenly chants echoing and glowing divine flowers falling through the air, completely illuminating the space.
And it isn't just flora and sound either. The space physically populates.
Yeah, things get crowded fast.
The poem describes the sky illuminating with Divya-Vaman, these massive divine abodes or palaces, and the arrival of Divya Puthan, divine deities.
Right.
The narrator realizes they are no longer sitting alone in the dirt. Their solitary midnight vigil has suddenly transformed into a crowded celestial stadium attended by gods and Brahmas.
It's a complete shift in reality.
Wait, I need to stop you there. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because as a human being reading this, I have to wonder about the psychological reaction to this.
Oh, sure.
If I'm sitting alone in the dark ruins, trying to meditate, and suddenly the sky tears open, glowing palaces appear, heavenly flowers are raining down, and an entire audience of literal gods surrounds me,
You'd run.
I would be absolutely terrified. I'd think I was losing my mind. How is the narrator sitting there peacefully? Is there any panic at all in the source material?
It's a very natural question to ask, but no, there is absolutely zero panic.
Really, none at all.
None. The narrator's reaction is just a massive expansion of that quiet joy we discussed earlier. If we connect this to the bigger picture of Buddhist cosmology and the poem's internal logic, the arrival of these celestial beings isn't meant to be an intimidating alien invasion.
Okay, so it's not like a threat.
Right. It represents a universal cosmic reverence.
So they aren't there to judge the narrator or scare them away?
Not at all. The gods and Brahmas haven't arrived to frighten the human observer. They've arrived to pay homage to the exact same thing the human is paying homage to.
Oh, I see. They are a congregation.
Exactly. The narrator is simply lucky enough and devoted enough to be sitting quietly in the right place at the right time with the right state of mind to witness this cosmic audience gathering for what is about to happen next.
And what happens next is the absolute climax of our depth dive today. Because this cosmic audience hasn't just gathered to politely admire a stone statue in the moonlight.
No, they're expecting something big.
They are there to witness a manifestation. The core miraculous event of the poem, the Yamaka Pratiharya, widely known as the Twin Miracle.
This is the moment the ancient stone statues, both the seated Samadhi and the towering Abukana, are completely transcended.
The stone dissolves.
The cold stone we talked about at the beginning just dissolves. The Buddha is seen actively performing the Twin Miracle, which is the simultaneous emission of fire and water from his physical body.
We really need to dig into the why and how of this, because the poem actually gives us the specific historical context for this miracle.
Yes, it's not just a random event.
Right, it doesn't just happen randomly for the sake of a cool light show. The poet explicitly references a very specific historical moment, the Buddha's journey to the city of Kapilavastu.
Yes, the text mentions the 7th week and the journey to Kapilavastu, and understanding this is deeply significant to understanding the poem.
Why is that?
Well, Kapilavastu was the Buddha's royal hometown. When he returned there after achieving enlightenment, his relatives, the royal Shakya clan, were incredibly proud and stubborn.
They didn't want to accept him.
Right, they thought, he is our younger relative, he used to be a prince like us, why should we bow to him?
So his relatives are basically acting like arrogant teenagers at a family reunion, saying, he's just our younger cousin, why should we respect him just because he went off and meditated?
Precisely. They were entirely caught up in worldly hierarchy and ego. So, to humble the pride of his relatives, the text notes that the Buddha didn't argue with them.
He didn't debate them.
No. Instead, he rose into the sky, utilizing his magnificent spiritual power, and performed this yamaka pratihārya. He emitted streams of fire from the upper part of his body and streams of water from the lower part at the exact same time, then alternated them.
That is the ultimate mic drop.
It really is.
But let's look at the elements themselves. Why fire and water?
It's about the absolute mastery over the fundamental laws of nature. Fire and water are elemental opposites, right?
Yeah, they destroy each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To manifest both simultaneously is to show that you have completely transcended the dualities and limitations of the physical world. It represents a perfect balance of immense power and cooling compassion.
It's almost like imagine you're walking through a museum and you are staring at a dusty old painting of an ancient volcano. It's totally static.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the canvas starts radiating intense heat and dripping actual glowing lava onto the museum floor.
Mhm.
The history is bleeding directly into your present reality.
Wow, yeah. That's exactly the feeling.
But how does the poet successfully bridge this massive gap? I mean, we went from a quiet stone statue in the Sri Lankan woods to a dynamic, explosive miracle of fire and water meant for ancient royalty thousands of miles away and thousands of years ago.
Okay.
How does the poem justify that leap?
The poet justifies it by showing that in the realm of ultimate devotion, time isn't a straight line.
It bends.
For the deeply devoted narrator of this poem, time completely collapses. The historical event at ancient Kapilavastu and the present solitary moment at the Kalawewa ruins become exactly the same moment.
They just overlap.
They perfectly overlap. Through the sheer intense force of the narrator's meditative devotion, the living Buddha performing the miracle and the cold stone monument become entirely indistinguishable.
That's wild.
The narrator isn't just remembering a nice story they read in a text. They are actively, viscerally witnessing the miracle alongside the gods. The fire and water are spreading right in front of them, illuminating the jungle in all directions, just as it illuminated the sky over Kapilavastu thousands of years ago.
That just gives you chills. It's the ultimate reward for that quiet, solitary devotion we saw in the very first stanza.
Exactly.
If they hadn't sat in the dark and embraced the silence, they never would have seen the stone dissolve. Which actually brings us to a really fascinating paradox in the poem. We get to this massive cosmic climax, and the narrator's reaction to it is entirely unexpected.
Yes, because after witnessing this ultimate reality-bending miracle, you would think the narrator's first instinct would be to pull out a megaphone.
Exactly. If I see a 40-foot stone statue turn into a living miracle, shooting fire and water, surrounded by an audience of floating palaces and gods, I am writing a book.
Right.
I'm live streaming it. I am running to the nearest town and grabbing everyone by the shoulders. But the narrator explicitly says, I will not reveal this secret.
The exact phrase in the text is that they will not tell the Vada Gotha, which means the intimate details or the inner workings of how these paramis or perfections were fulfilled.
They just keep it to themselves.
They recognize that what they have witnessed is a deeply profound spiritual reality that simply cannot and should not be casually broadcasted to people who haven't put in the work to understand it.
So instead of becoming a town crier, the narrator makes a vow. They detail a final promise in the text.
And that's a huge commitment.
Yeah, they vow to remain right there in the courtyard, the Malua. They commit to staying in that exact spot, watching the rays of light and witnessing the Buddha preach the Dhamma, the teachings, to this gathered audience of gods.
And the commitment is total and absolute. The final line of the poem states, they will sit there alone in the midnight as long as life lasts, which in the text is Divi Thayana Thuru.
Divi Thayana Thuru. Wow. So what does this all mean? Are they
trying to tell us that the true essence of this miracle simply can't be explained in words
if it
and
is
can
such a
only be
sacred
experienced
secret,
firsthand?
If they vow not
This
to
raises
reveal
an
the inner
important
workings
question
of this
regarding the
miraculous
very nature of
fulfillment,
true
why
devotion
write a poem
as
about it for us
presented
to
in the
read?
source
That's a
text.
fair point.
Hit
Is
the
the
nail on
poet
the
just
head.
teasing?
The poem itself isn't a betrayal of the secret. It's a testament to the state of being that allows one to witness the secret.
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction. It's not a how-to guide, it's a proof of concept.
Exactly. The poet is suggesting that ultimate spiritual truths, the living, breathing reality of these ancient teachings. They aren't found in public spectacles.
They aren't on display.
No, they aren't found by demanding logical proof in the broad daylight. They are found in quiet, enduring, private dedication. It requires sitting in the dark hours of the night, entirely alone, with a mind so joyful and devoted, the stone melts away and history becomes the present.
And tying that to how we live today makes it so powerful. We live in an era where if you don't broadcast an experience, it's like it didn't happen.
Oh, 100%.
We want the spectacle, and we want everyone to know we saw the spectacle. But the narrator here sees the greatest spectacle in the universe and chooses to keep it private.
It's completely countercultural for us.
The vow to stay in the courtyard for the rest of their life is the ultimate proof that the miracle wasn't just a fleeting magic trick. It was a permanent internal transformation of their reality.
Precisely. The transformation is so complete that the outside world no longer matters. The courtyard, the silence, and the eternal presence of the teachings become their entire universe. They don't need to convince anyone else because they have experienced the absolute truth for themselves.
Let's pull all of this together for you listening, because this has been a really incredible journey through a deeply layered piece of source material.
It really has.
We started with the heavy physical reality of the world, walking alone at midnight through the pitch black, dark stone pillars of Jetavana, sitting quietly under the sharp moonlight near the massive Samadhi and Abukana statues.
We saw how that physical grounding, that willingness to embrace the suffocating darkness and isolation, created the necessary psychological quiet for the ethereal shift.
And that shift happened just after midnight, marked by the celestial chanting of sadhu and the glowing canopy of divine Parasathu Madara flowers falling from the sky.
We watched the celestial audience of gods and Brahmas gather, not to frighten or overwhelm the narrator, but to join them in cosmic reverence.
And then, the absolute climax. The historical twin miracle of Kapilavastu.
The Buddha simultaneously emitting fire and water, a violent and beautiful mastery over nature, erupting right there in the present moment, proving that to a truly devoted mind, time is just an illusion.
Concluding with that incredibly powerful paradox, witnessing the ultimate truth and choosing not to shout it to the world, but rather to keep the Vata Gota, the inner secret, completely safe.
Choosing to sit quietly in the courtyard, listening to the teachings for as long as life lasts.
It is a stunning portrait of what it means to be truly devoted, not for an audience, but for yourself.
It really is, and it leaves you with something profound to consider about how we interact with history, spirituality, and our own attention today.
Yeah, absolutely.
The narrator found a living miracle by simply sitting quietly at midnight, refusing the urge to leave, and opening themselves up to the sheer weight of the space. It makes you wonder, in our world of constant noise and endless broadcasting, if you were to sit in total silence at a place of deep historical meaning today, without your phone, without any distractions.
Just totally disconnected.
Right. What hidden miracles of memory and history might reveal themselves to you when the rest of the world is asleep?
What an incredible thought to end on. If the stone dissolved for you, what would you actually see? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. We love unpacking these fascinating concepts with you. Until next time, stay curious and maybe find a quiet courtyard of your own to sit in tonight.